program will begin in 10 minutes. Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. please welcome to the stage Bloomberg Businessweek's Tim Stenovic.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming today. Welcome to Bloomberg's briefing on defending the digital economy. Whether you're here in person or if you're joining us somewhere remotely, we're grateful that you are here. We're thrilled to have you with us this afternoon. Think about today's interconnected economy, protecting the digital ecosystem, the network of tech, the people, the processes, everything that powers business that allows us to do what we're doing. It's never been more critical. Every interaction we have online, from the initial user action to the many systems and services that it touches, each of those present a broad surface of potential vulnerabilities that hackers can exploit. Companies are deploying advanced tools like AI-driven defenses, zero-trust frameworks, and next-gen threat detection. But long-term resilience also depends equally on the readiness of different workforces and the consistent adoption of best practices. This program convenes industry leaders, security experts, and tech innovators to examine the shifting threat landscape and the real-time strategies required to stay ahead. Drawing on diverse perspectives in commerce and security, the discussions today will deliver actionable insights that leaders can then apply to protect critical assets and prepare for the challenges of tomorrow. Before we get started, though, just a couple announcements this afternoon. First, I do want to thank our sponsor, Mastercard. We're going to hear from Mastercard in just a little while. Also, I know a lot of you have questions. If you do have questions that you want to ask of certain panelists, just scan the QR code. You can see it on the table, you can see it on the screen, and we're going to try to get to whatever we can live on stage if we do have time. We do also want you to engage with us on social media. To do that, just use the hashtag #BTechCybersecurity, and then you can also follow along with today's highlights. We'll be sharing highlights and engagement using the handle at Bloomberg Live, so feel free to tag us there as well. Now, I'd like to welcome to the stage Johan Gerber, Executive Vice President, Security Solutions at Mastercard, for some opening remarks.
Well, everybody, good afternoon. It's really good to be here with all of you, and I just shout out to Bloomberg, Tim, you and the team for bringing all of us together here on something that is so important that, especially for this audience, is very near and dear to our heart. You know, it feels like the word unprecedented is almost has no meaning anymore because you have to almost use that every week nowadays. If just looking at how cyber threats have changed, how we see nation states getting involved in business. When I take a step back just very briefly at the macro level, I want to share a little bit of what we see, talk a little bit about how we think we should all approach this, and then we can jump straight into the content. But at the macro level, there are three big things that we are looking at. First of all, I come from a fraud background. Just for a little bit of context, I used to be a police officer many years ago. I ran fraud shops for banks, chased bad guys all over the place. I think I eventually got tired and said technology must be able to help us to catch them or prevent them from doing things. But I remember days when we were talking about the evolution of fraud. Now we talk more about the evolution of technology than we talk about the evolution of the bad folks almost. There's just the number of generational changing new technology deployments and the speed at which they come at us has just increased at an unprecedented level, to use that word again. So we see that change. You know, we've seen the iPhone come, we've seen AI just dawn on us all of a sudden. Quantum is on our doorstep as the next one, even faster. So this is not going to slow down at all. So you've got this massive evolution of technology. At the same time, you feel like we as a global entities should be working closer together. Yet it feels like we are being fragmented and there's more sovereignty than ever before. So while we should be collaborating more and while we're digitally connected more than ever before, it feels like from a geopolitical point of view, we're actually moving further and further, and this isolation approach is not helping the people who are trying to defend companies, entities, countries, when we need to be sharing intelligence and sharing data. So that's the second point. The third one is, I would say, the industrialization of cybercrime. Cybercrime has now become a fully fledged industry. I mean, we talk about $15.6 trillion potentially. And I have to stand here and tell you, I'm not sure how they got that number, but it's a big number. And even if we were slightly south of that, it still is a number that should concern all of us and probably do concern all of us. So if you think about how access to data, access to technology has been weaponized by cyber criminals. On the dark web, I can buy information, I can buy technology, I can buy packages, I can buy services. I can buy ransomware as a service, I can buy money laundering as a service, you name it. So everything is there. And that has fueled this, I would say, almost gray zone where fraud, cybercrime, financial crimes, money laundering has all kind of meshed together. So our worlds have become really interconnected in terms of how we together as industries, and especially as the financial industry, are looking at things. So these are some of the big trends that we're seeing. Now, it's not all bad. I think, we are making good progress. We see more and more people coming together. We see events like this where people are willing to talk. We see AI now really becoming an ingredient of automating the defender's approach to defend ourselves against AI attacks. I think we've all now seen that the automation of attacks against us is fully there. We've talked about the potential of a fully automated attack. Now we've seen it actually happening. Nation states are involved in that as well. So, but now I think the good thing is we've got the same technology on the defender side. I'm an optimist. I do believe we can do this. I do believe if we have the right technology, if we have the right investment, if we have the right threat intelligence. Mastercard invested in a company called Recorded Future. We feel that is so important for us to know what the adversaries are doing so that we can plan and we can create our own strategies. So that piece for me is really, really important. So I'm going to leave you just with 3 things that we believe are important for us. Partnerships. Partnerships at events like this. Private-public partnerships are absolutely critical. Private-to-private partnerships. In fact, I think we're at a place that, given the geopolitical blocks that are forming around the world, as private entities, I think we almost have an obligation more so than ever before to really make sure that we connect the dots between each other, that intelligence and threats and things are flowing between us. And of course, we're going to work very, very closely with governments. There's no way on earth we can do this apart from them. So private-public, private-private, these partnerships are absolutely critically important for us. Platforms. The need for us to build bigger platforms, the need for us to embed security into the thinking, into the design of what we do. I think that's something that we want to put on every technology company across the world, every government around the world. When we build platforms, it has to come with with all of that embedded in it from the get-go. That for me is absolutely essential for us to do bigger platforms where this is all embedded. And then the last one is just principles. How do we make sure that we get the basics right? How do we make sure that we adhere to those principles that will make us a safer society, that allows our systems to talk to one another, even if we are spread across the world in many different places, to allow the free flow of information so that we as defenders can actually help each other fight a better fight. And I think if we do this right, if we do the right investments, if we focus on the right partnerships and these big platforms that we are building, I think we can truly make a difference in the lives out there. I always have the concern around who's looking at our consumer. That for me is something that's very important. Who's looking at the small business? At Mastercard, we have a keen interest in our small businesses. It makes up globally almost 50% of GDP is being derived on the back of small businesses. More than 70% of all employment happens through the small business sector. So I'm almost at the place where we should all collectively start thinking of small businesses as potential critical infrastructure because they're that important to our economies. And I'll leave you with a very last thing. If there's one thing that the Land Rover Jaguar breach taught me, is that I think every cyber event should be now thought of as an economic event. If you really think what happened there, the impact, of course, was on the main company, but the blast radius was an entire supply chain of small companies, small businesses in the environments where all the plants were located, where these people were working. I heard that there was something like almost 20,000 businesses impacted through that. That has a massive economic impact on us. One of the things we did at Mastercard is with the Colonial Pipeline, we actually tracked consumer spending data, what happened when that breach was revealed. And it was fascinating to see how consumers were doing panic buying. People were literally emptying up the shelves all along the East Coast of that. So these things are now, you can't disconnect them anymore. So I'll close with this. Very keen to see what's going to happen today in our conversations here. Very keen on the content. We've got a very strong agenda, lots of good speakers here. But let's all go with this mindset of principles in mind. We're no longer operating within a silo. We're operating in a very interconnected global world where we truly have an economic impact in the work that we do. And therefore, things like this are so important for us. And with that, I'm gonna kick off and get the first set of speakers on board. But really looking forward to a great agenda today. Thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the three of you for joining this conversation. Great setup by Johan there. I just assume at this point that my social security number is all over the dark web. So you three have the same exact position, but in three very different industries. We've got healthcare represented, finance, and telecom. I thought, why don't we start with like an icebreaker where each of you shares a war story, like a challenge or a breach that really tested the resilience of your institution's systems and how you overcame it. Alan, let's start with you.
So, I thought about this question, and let's start with the challenge. And the challenge is you never want to be the reason. The reason why your CEO loses sleep at night because he has to recast, you trust my brand. The reason why your CFO has to recast the forecast or the guidance because something critical happened. And as I tell my staff often, boring is beautiful, and we want to keep things quiet. And so our challenge, the war, as you say, is to keep things steady, to keep things quiet, to keep things boring. And that within itself is a challenge every single day.
All right, so you want to be boring. Rich, what about you? What is one story you might share on?
Oh, gosh, well, I guess my first time I was a CISO was back in 2003 timeframe at a company called ChoicePoint, which was one of the first organizations that experienced a large-scale, even though it was called a breach, it was just an account takeover, not an actual hack. But back then, obviously, it caught the news. There was massive windfire. And I think the most important lesson learned out of that still carries forth is how you handle the event is equally as important as the actions that you take. So effective communication, transparency, when appropriate, are all very, very important things because of the fact that in today's world, it's not a matter of if you were breached. This is a matter of when or you actually recognize you have been.
I would argue even more important than the breach itself, and you wrote the book on it, so you would know. Munish, how about you? What story would you want to share?
I wouldn't say any specific, but I'll highlight the fact Johan spoke about it, and I think a lot of what he said absolutely resonated with me. I think with the rest of the room here as well. It's a very tightly knit economy now, super well integrated. I think a lot of us must be following the events of the past few weeks. We saw, some of the cloud service providers had some concerns and issues, and some of the content providers had some issues. So making sure that you're really well prepared in this, I think we are all essentially trying to do the same thing, which is identify the critical points of failure or single points of failure, as they're called, control planes in certain areas, and making sure there are really strong resiliency plans to be able to deal with them, whether it's cyber or just an availability issue. In many ways, as we say it within the firm, you just have to have your clients be able to transact and engage with the institution or with the bank in this case. They need access to the money when they want it, or the services we provide. So I think I won't specifically go to one, though I'd say the amount of activity that we see from nation-state actors in terms of trying to identify vulnerabilities on the edge device has only gone up. So there is plenty happening in that space that we continue to keep a close watch on.
Well, we'll come back to nation-state hackers for sure, but you brought up some of the disruptions of late. I'm just going to call them out. AWS, CrowdStrike, Cloudflare, Microsoft, Amazon. I mean, we're talking about basically like the fabric of the internet being brought into question, and none of it is under your control. You can control Wells Fargo, CVS, and all of telecom, but in any of these in any of these situations, none of that matters. So let's talk about that third-party risk a little bit in more specificity. For example, the United Health hack. Nothing to do with CVS, and yet everything to do with CVS. How did that affect you, and like, what were the lessons learned for you?
So what we learned, actually what was punctuated by that experience, is that we don't work in a vacuum. Like CVS Health or any other healthcare company is not isolated. We work in an ecosystem. We're all dependent upon one another. And so it really emphasized the point of we have to architect for resiliency. We have to architect for making sure that we take into account any single point of failure. What we were most proud of is that despite the fact there was a widespread impact, our pharmacies were able to service our members and our patients. We were able to get through that. We were able to count on the solutions we put in place to work around the issue, and we can't take our eyes off the ball, as they say. We have to continue to identify where those single points of failures are. We have to account for them and continue to stress test those points of failure.
Great. And Rich, I'm not going to call out AT&T for any particular specific incident, but you've been through enough companies and enough industries where you've seen that third party risk arise. How does telecom deal with that?
Well, I mean, telecom's a little bit unique because in telecom, you might have three networks. You have your traditional IT network, your wireless network, and your wireline network. And a big part of that wireline and wireless networks is dependent upon third parties, just because of the infrastructure and all the equipment that goes into that. So having a very strong third-party program doesn't mean just having the controls, but it's also the ability to have the monitoring associated with it, to understand that if there is a member of your supply chain that actually falls victim, what is your actions, what is your protocol, what's in your contracts, understanding all that. I still think a lot of organizations don't understand and focus on all their B2B connections to understand which ones are live and not live. Just like everything else that we're challenged with as Chief Information Security Officers, understand that inventory of connectivity to your B2B providers is critical, because just like a dormant cloud instance or dormant AI agents, if you don't understand what connections you have, whether they're live or not live, it is a channel that can oftentimes be exploited.
Rich, you mentioned B2B. AT&T is interesting. I mean, and your role is interesting in that you're not just protecting the internal operations and data of AT&T. You've also outwardly begun offering a service to customers at AT&T. Can you describe that and your role in it?
Yeah, sure. Our thought is we need to take what has been basically a traditional detective type of approach. Let's tell you about bad things happening. Let's tell you you're having bad things happening. And because AT&T, 1/3 of the world traffic runs across it, we said, hey, can we be preventive? What can we do upstream to knock down basically bad things? And initially focused on the small to medium business, but obviously we're seeing this expansion in the enterprise space. Yeah. A basic statistic is on a month-to-month basis right now, we're basically blocking like 36 billion threats, right? Every
what is that
month.
Percentage-wise for like any single customer?
Haven't done it. Just depends on the size of the customers, depends on how much traffic they have going. But in essence, all we're trying to do is filter out the bad, and we see anywhere from 10 to 70% of customers' traffic bad.
Wow, 70%. Munish, I want to pivot over to you at Wells Fargo. Those hacks, multiple hacks at the U.S. Treasury Department, one can argue that that is another third-party risk, and I'd like to understand how Wells Fargo has responded to that.
I can get into that. By the way, as Rich was speaking, this is a classic example of us as a financial institution relying on the controls and the processes he's putting in place and the detections So this is an area where we all really collaborate and partner. So very grateful for the work he and his team are doing. I mean, before I get into the specifics of the question you asked, gone are the days when you could just do an assurance program over a third party. Once a year, once every couple of years, check in to see, answer my question, let me see your control posture. That's where you are a little bit of a problem. you have to be really categorizing your third parties in terms of what is your critical third party engagement, what's the critical infrastructure, and how are you really monitoring the interactions with that relationship. So in that way, the two that you mentioned are no different. I must say, in this space, there was extreme candor and transparency right from the beginning. Okay. So we knew exactly what was going on. The right parties were brought together. And I think that's at the heart of getting to the right outcome. So if you have a third party that is less than candid about what is going on, it becomes very challenging to be able to intercept exactly how do you actually react from the perspective of a consumer of that service. What's the impact to your customer data? What's the impact to your services? When you have a counterparty, whether it's part of the government or otherwise, that is open about what is going on, it becomes a lot easier to get to the bottom of the things. And I must say, what it did tell us is that the significance and the importance of fundamentals, like getting basic access management right.
Oh, right.
Is still paramount. Paramount. You can talk about AI all day long, but all of these capabilities using data, using signals, etc., sits on top of very robust foundations. If your foundation, you're not looking at that in the right way, then it could be problematic.
I mean, maybe we should talk about that, Ryan. Just basic hygiene. And the fact that we still live in this world. How do we still live in this world where so many breaches happen because the password is password? Like, how do you solve for that finally, once and for all? Rich, Rich, you've been in the business for a long time. I won't say how many years. But how do you solve for that finally? Is it just education? Like,
I mean, education is critical. We want people to be good digital citizens and understand good practices, just like anything. But as practitioners, we look at things and we look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and the farther up the framework you can go to put a control in, right, the more powerful as it gives you time to do other things. So, I mean, we have to move towards passwordless type of approaches. We have to go with anti-phishing techniques for authentication. The identity cycle is huge. I mean, if you look at in the last 18 months, the amount of organizations that have fell victim because of exploitation of identity is traumatic. So I think what we have to do is look towards doing the basics fundamentally well, but also moving up that attack chain to mitigate those threats. It's not just MFA anymore. It's basically phish-proof MFA, right, or phish-resistant MFA is where you need to go to. Keep in mind, the bad guys have the opportunity to reverse engineer every control that we establish to find an edge. And in today's world with AI, the biggest challenge is speed. The adversaries have the advantage right now because of the speed capability associated with AI. Now imagine AI and quantum. Quantum's power. Can you imagine when AI and quantum get married? It's going to be a whole new world.
Yeah. Ellen, you similarly have been in a few different sectors. Very interesting companies in your background. And I wondered, in terms of like basic education and security defenses, how does healthcare and CVS stack up with some of the other companies and industries that you've worked with, and how is it different?
I think the biggest difference is the regulation. So I think healthcare versus something like media, the regulations that we're under, the scrutiny that we're under. You're talking about HIPAA, you're talking about the FDA, there's different regulatory agencies that scrutinize us and everything that we do. And so our obligation to our members and our patients is, our moral obligation is very high, and our statutory obligation is even higher. So we have to meet a very high trust standard, and we can't take our eyes off of that. But to build off of what Rich just said, there are two things that are going on. Put the technology aside. There's tempo and there's access. And those things coming together, now layer on the technology, we have a serious riddle to solve here. Right? Because the cost of access is getting lower all the time. You don't have to be a nation-state actor to act like one.
You just have to have ChatGPT.
You just have to have ChatGPT, and off you go. Right? And then the tempo. I mean, we can know the old castle and moat approach that companies take, that's operating at human speed. We have to operate at machine speed. So all of the investments are, how can we quickly accelerate the way in which we react? And then you have to understand those things. And so we're talking about anti-phishing techniques and access to those nature, but if you're designing for human resilience, which is what we're talking about, the more complex you make those things, the more likely you are to miss a step, and then human dependency becomes your problem.
Right, right. That's a good point. I want to get to a question up on the board from the audience because I think it's a really good one. Is there a new or emerging threat that is likely to cause widespread issues, specifically because of advancement in AI, which is, I think, what Ellen and Rich are touching on? Munish, why don't you take this one? What specifically scares you?
I think there is always something on the horizon. So I think it pays to be a little paranoid in this space and making sure that you're watching all aspects of what is happening in terms of advancements in technology. But I think almost everybody in the room heard that orchestration of the attack using a large language model, from Anthropic. And what we are now seeing is, a few quarters ago it was phishing emails generated by AI software. Look quite realistic and hard to fend off. And okay, we adjust to that. Deep fakes, got it. Understood few controls, that we put in place for that. Ability to generate voice-based authentication, yes, that's also a risk. But this is different. This is using the LLM to be able to engineer an attack and orchestrate it in minutes. That's quite unprecedented. So what you're seeing is that from our perspective, yes, you have to be able to defend against that using similar tools and techniques, but also if you haven't taken the time to build your infrastructure, access management, like really robust design of segmentation and getting ready, it can become very difficult. There's another stat that I want to mention. It's not related to the question directly per se, but I think it'll resonate with the audiences. The quickest lateral movement is now under a minute. Imagine 51 seconds, 50 odd seconds, under a minute for something to come in and move laterally. So you marry that with the advancements to generate code, and Johan was mentioning it, you don't even have to have extreme cyber background, or you could buy these capabilities on the marketplace and unleash, against very established industries and companies. That's a challenge that we have all got to be ready for together and individually as our own institutions.
And just to define lateral movement for those who, aren't living and breathing cyber every day, you're talking about that point of entry, whether it's an employee's email account, and then suddenly using that to jump into some key critical infrastructure, correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Move away from the source to another part of the infrastructure,
Right. And Rich, that's the one side of it. That's how the bad guys are using AI. How are the good guys using AI to counter the bad guys?
There are lots of examples. I know a lot of CISOs, as they're looking at how do you incorporate AI into what you're doing, are really asking their teams to go and say, answer this question, or this riddle, as you said it. Riddle me this. If AI can do this, how does it change things? And some of those things are speed to detection, action and correlation, bringing together disparate data sets. So I've seen the use of AI from a simple standpoint where it's basically using a large language model to do something as simple as ask security. And you ask the question, how do you protect internet-facing applications? It comes up with all the controls, pulls in all the architectural diagrams, everything that an app owner might need to be used, to even moving along further now, taking all the disparate data through the different intelligence that's available out there, pulling that in, matching it against your inventory, then based on that inventory and based on the probability of occurrence as well as the threat actors, putting together a calculation from risk that then puts forth a recommended action, which then enables someone to just push a button to remediate the fix. So it really just depends on how people are using the application. But there are great opportunities to use AI to optimize what we're doing as defenders.
Yeah, those are impressive ideas. I want to stay with you for a second because there is a question here about what new ways industry leaders are collaborating to share information and deepen their understanding to control risk. And I'm staying with you, Rich, because that sharing of information has really escalated in the telecom industry in recent months. for reasons that maybe you may or may not want to get into, but I thought maybe you could share that some notes on that effort.
Sure. I mean, specific to telecom, there's lots of ISACs that are out there. There hadn't been really one established. So we all got together. So actually, 23 of us have information sharing agreements in place today. Everything from Australia to Japan to the UK to Germany to Spain to Canada and within the United States. And we've put together guidelines, and our teams get together on a monthly basis, share what's going on, examples that protect us, and then we're taking that even further and formalizing it. We're coming together with our key vendors and actually not just sharing information, but sharing expectations to them on how we want to make sure that their products are actually secure. Going back to your third party, you have to start with the supply chain and get them all to a certain level of protection before it comes into your environment. So, I mean, I can appreciate the information sharing model. I've been doing this since the Clinton administration, and there's great models out there, but sometimes you just have to just go do. And I know from a telecom standpoint, what we're doing is we're actually doing, and not only are we sharing the information, we're collaborating, because in order to effectively drive the change that we're looking to do in our environment, it really does take a global approach to it. A particular telecom, even if they take actions on different types of things, are very limited. But when you collaborate with all the telecommunications around the world, you can actually see an entire campaign ongoing, and hopefully the actions we can take to help mitigate those risks.
So one of the most pervasive hacks in recent history has been this telecom hack that was orchestrated by a state-sponsored actor. And Munish, you mentioned that state-sponsored hacking is very much on the rise. We know that banking and telecom are critical infrastructure pieces that these kinds of hackers tend to target. Healthcare is also a critical infrastructure and a less appreciated part of that targeting of state-sponsored hacking. And I wondered if you could share what you're seeing from nation-state hackers on the health side.
So the thing about nation-state actors is the way we've seen their behaviors not so much evolve, but stay consistent, which I think is just as scary. Incredibly patient. They will harvest that investment, and they will sit and stasis for years, and they will wait. And all of a sudden, you realize they have moved laterally, and they have more information on you than you realize. And when they decide to cash in, as they say, they'll take everything. I mean, the recent F5 hack, they got it all. And the impact of that was that exposure for hundreds of customers who use those technology platforms, and the reaction creates enormous amount of risk. Because the one thing that, especially at scale, which is true, a stability issue is a security issue. Those things go hand in glove. If you don't have resiliency, if you don't have stability, you have a security problem. And you can't separate those two. I have two roles at CVS Health. I run infrastructure, and I run security. And the reason why we brought those two things together is because we can't separate the issues. And so we said we're going to treat them the same. And so the answer to your question is that when we establish trust with our patients and our members, we establish continuity. It's important that we ensure that all those things comprise what we consider critical infrastructure. As the last publicly traded large distribution pharmacy in the United States, we have to work. And so what we're seeing out in the market is that we have third-party risk. We've got supply chain disruption risk. We have the quote-unquote traditional security exposure risk. And then we have market exposure risk.
Right. And now geopolitical risk. This is a good question for Munish here. Financial institutions often have these critical legacy systems, which I think is shorthand for old. What strategies have you found most successful for identifying vulnerabilities? And maybe in one way, I would word it as like, what are the big red flags? Like, what are you looking out for?
Well, I think this is partially true, but the way to look at it is, it's less about whether you have legacy system or not. The way to think about it is, how do you consistently identify vulnerabilities, and how do you, Rich partially touched on this, it's less about a signal coming from one source at this point. Of course, like we do vulnerability scoring and we'll patch it, whether it's legacy or not, we'll take care of it if we don't have mitigating controls around it, or if we see the risk, what was called the residual risk after applying the mitigation controls on that vulnerability. If we still feel that the risk is high, we'll take care of it, whether it is modern or not. I think I would say the way to think about is now picking up signals from different sources and then putting them together. So the data has never been more important to be able to stitch that together, sometimes using your expertise, but in many cases now increasingly using models, LLM models to be able to say, it's also a term, you see vulnerability chaining. Yes, they are level 4, not very severe if you ignore it, but if you put 3 together, 4 together, 5 together, does it start to create an opening on your software that you must get in front of, or that you probably have a vulnerability score that is low, but you also have an end of life on that underlying device, so code vulnerable, device vulnerable, infrastructure. You got to look at it differently. So it's not particularly the way question is framed. I'd slightly look at it differently, which is you got to be able to take a holistic approach, risk assess, and then apply your controls and see what's the action to take. And usually you get your answer very, very clearly.
All right. Well, you solved cybersecurity then, I guess. We're out of town, but Rich, I can't end this discussion without asking you. You did this role for the CIA. I mean, what was that like? Like, what is the single most shocking thing about working for the CIA in a CISO role?
I think one of the most shocking things was I thought it was like a folk tale story of some sorts. But when I first got there, I was hearing about these individuals, new kids that were being hired, showing up on their first day and realizing they're not allowed to take their cell phone into the building, so they quit.
Oh, they quit?
Yeah.
They just got about. I would too. I would too. Well, thank you so much for joining us. What an awesome conversation. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, great to see everyone. So what I thought I'll do in the next 15 minutes is really give everyone kind of a state of the market in terms of where we are with cybersecurity and what is changing when it comes to the LLMs and the Gen AI world, how it's influencing cybersecurity, and then really end with some M&A data that we have aggregated when it comes to cybersecurity and also some regulations and cybersecurity insurance. So, I mean, we talked so far, we've heard, about the complexity of attacks and how different types of attacks, whether it's social engineering or identity or, some of the traditional forms of firewall attacks have resulted in sort of a fragmented infrastructure. But what's changed this year is really the Anthropic attack, which was alluded to in the last panel, wherein when you look at the level of sophistication, which has been increasing over the years, really grew manyfold in terms of what these LLMs have inside them. I mean, think about, they are trained on, 15 trillion tokens. How much information they have in terms of even the default passwords and the configurations of the systems. So it's all about putting guardrails and, systems in place. And that's where it gets very tricky, in terms of what kind of protection that you have at the chatbot level and what the LLMs come out of the box. So in terms of breaches and incidents, you can see, we've been in an environment where the sophistication of breaches continues to increase. And even though the number of incidents have gone down, but you can see the success of breaches to incidents continues to go up. And that has to do with, the kind of tools that hackers are using, and whether it's state-sponsored attacks or some other types of attacks. It's just they are focused a lot more on, lateral movement and doing it in a way where it has not been seen before, that it can be detected easily. And so what has happened to this $200 billion industry over the years is you have all these different sort of fragmented products which really are aimed at protecting the latest vector. So right now, cloud workload protection is one of the highest growth segments. The reason that is the case is because, a lot of these AI products are deployed on the cloud, and a workload level protection is kind of table stakes now. Whereas the network and endpoint markets that have been existent for the last 10 years have seen slowing growth, but clearly companies can't get rid of them because we are in a hybrid environment and they want to protect everything. So anytime a new vector emerges, there is new security category that gets created, which is why this market is so fragmented. And based on our work, the two fastest growing areas would be cloud workload protection and observability. And I'll get into why observability, but suffice to say that data security, tracking your data on a 360 basis has become all the more important now with LLMs and how companies are fine-tuning their models and things like that. So I do want to spend most of my time here because there is a profound shift that is taking place with Gen AI, and really the leakage of information in the world of LLMs is something that it's very hard to track. And I almost feel like, no matter how good you are, you just cannot be 100% sure in terms of what information is leveraged for, tokenization, what information is leveraged for your own security, and the lines continue to blur. So, the fact that the reasoning models use tools and tools of all kinds, whether it's browsers or writing code on the fly, it's so hard to track, and I'm sure we'll hear it in some of the upcoming panels around the challenges that the tool use poses when it comes to reasoning models. But clearly, that is a big change. And finally, we are talking about security for AI systems, but there is that aspect of AI for security wherein, all of these security systems generates alerts. How do you leverage AI to sift through those alerts in real time and use that intelligence to prevent attacks in real time? That is the big promise that AI has, but clearly there is a lot of research being done on that front. So in terms of Gen AI, look, these are the most popular use cases, and the common thread you will find across all these use cases is tokenization. And tokenization is nothing but converting text or images or videos into the smallest entities where even though it's vectors, it's basically that data or that information that you are translating into a form that's driving your brute force pattern recognition or that transformer attention, and it's all data. At the end of the day, that's what's happening. So clearly, there is a big range when it comes to the type of Gen AI use case. So if it's a basic Q&A use case, you can see, it's up to 500 tokens. But if it's an agentic workflow, we're talking about even 1 million tokens where the LLM just works for hours and, it generates 1 million plus tokens. And that's what happened in the Anthropic attack. It had smaller chunks of programs running for hours. It completed the task. And the LLM didn't realize the big picture. But essentially, the agentic workflows can work for hours. And, it can do type of tasks where it's so hard for you to track what is it part of. And I think that agentic aspect will magnify this problem when it comes to the deployment of LLMs. So another sort of data point in terms of what's going on with reasoning, you can see the tokens process have just taken off across all the frontier LLMs, whether it's Google or OpenAI. The API tokens per minute, and this is something that OpenAI has shared recently, the 6 billion tokens per minute. These are the kind of the volume that we are talking about when it comes to API calls. And again, you were protecting data before. Now you have to protect tokens. And what are for real use cases? What are for malicious use cases? It's not very easy to discern easily. So clearly, the scale of the problem is growing many-fold. And this kind of puts it in perspective in terms of what goes on in a reasoning model. I mean, look at the right-hand side, the tool use. We are talking about browsers, API calls, proprietary databases, evaluation functions, other LLM calls. So if you are fine-tuning the model and deploying a reasoning model for some sort of a use case, this is the kind of tool use that we are talking about, and think of how many tokens it generates. So clearly, securing an AI agent is not the easiest task. On top of that, the machine identities. I mean, that's the one thing, previously companies had to care about human identities. Now, every human user has got at least, the hope is they will have 30 to 40 agents running, doing some sort of task. So that human identity gets magnified into agent identity, and that's where it gets even harder when it comes to the scale of the problem. So the one other data point is coding agents, which is probably the most established use case at the enterprise level right now for LLMs. And think of what's happening, with DevSecOps. I mean, all these agents, when they're doing reasoning tasks, are writing code on the fly. So you just have to figure out, what kind of code is being written for good intent versus bad intent. And that's where the use of coding agents clearly is a new type of use case where the DevOps part and the observability part becomes all the more important. So yeah, this is another data point. This is a survey that we conducted at the start of the year in terms of importance of cybersecurity, and clearly every CIO that we surveyed felt like the cybersecurity has to increase because of the increased risk that is posed by the LLMs. So a quick couple of minutes on the M&A landscape. I mean, the Google Viz acquisition hasn't closed. Palo Alto recently announced the acquisition of CyberArk and Chronosphere. And the trend is very clear. I mean, the hyperscalers want to increase the security that is deployed on their cloud, because clearly a lot of the frontier LLMs are consumed through the hyperscalers. The pure play companies like Palo Alto feel they need, browser security, because that is a very important vector to protect against. And then the Chronosphere acquisition is really observability, which is I want to mine the log in every possible way, whether it's an API call or anything else, and make sure I'm on top of that. So you can see the trend from the recent acquisitions that have taken place in terms of what these companies are prioritizing. Just a quick slide on the hyperscale versus pure play. You can see, the hyperscalers. I mean, Microsoft clearly has a very sizable security business, but even other ones, Amazon and Google, have been adding native cybersecurity, and for a good reason. Again, we talked about how cloud workload security is one of the fastest growing segments. Well, they are accountable for any cyber attack that happens on their cloud. So clearly, I think they will continue to beef up their own security, whether it's through acquisitions or some of the other organic additions that they have done. And then really quick on the insurance, like the price of insurance has gone up. It clearly went up a lot higher during the the COVID phase, but since then it's been steadily going up since 2023, and I feel the recent sort of LLMs kind of increase in vulnerabilities created by tokenization will drive further increase in that cyber insurance because the risk is higher, and that's a trend that we are likely to see more of. In terms of regulation, I mean, clearly there are, a couple of cybersecurity acts that are currently in the works in the EU, but there hasn't been anything major in the U.S., and that's where, whether it's President Executive Order, which did come during the Biden era, but we haven't seen anything big in terms of, making sure that there are proper controls and companies have to implement certain kind of guardrails when it comes to deploying these systems. So to conclude, I mean, look, clearly, the LLMs have a much higher level of risk when it comes to, the Gen AI features that are getting deployed. And a lot of the companies have been piloting, what sort of features they want to deploy, whether it's chatbot or something to do with image generation and stuff like that. But there is no doubt that, when it comes to injecting a bad prompt, the risk is very high, and it's very hard to, put guardrails to prevent these systems from malfunctioning, because we've seen even a frontier LLM company like Anthropic that's focused on, guardrails from the very beginning, even that got hacked. So clearly, the risks are high. As I mentioned, the hyperscalers adding their own security will be a trend that we'll see more of, and we'll hear from some of the companies in the panel. And then when it comes to LLMs really driving security automation, which is expected to be a big trend, and we've heard about that promise, for a while, that security can be automated. We have a talent gap. I feel LLMs has a real promise. Whether we'll see, a standalone LLM that's focused on cybersecurity, I don't think so. That's going to happen anytime soon. But these companies have a lot of data, and they talk about, trillions of data points when it comes to cyber attacks and stuff like that. So clearly, there is promise to develop, an LLM or something along those lines when it comes to a foundational model type of approach with cybersecurity. And it'll be interesting to see if we see something along those lines. So that's what I wanted to share, and we'll be discussing other aspects of this during the panel that I'll be hosting later on. So, thank you.
Hi. Thank you for everyone for being here for this evening with us, and thank you, Jen, for being with us. Thank you to Bloomberg for the opportunity. And my name is Seçkin Ilgo, and I'm leading security solutions for Mastercard North America, which includes cyber, AI, fraud, disputes, and digital assets. And I'm very honored to have Jen Martin with us from Citizens. Do you want to give a quick intro about yourself, and then we kick it off our very rapid fireside chat?
Yeah, so myself and my team lead the prevention, detection, and resolution of fraud for Citizens Bank. We're a top 15 bank based here in the Northeast. You see us all over the city.
Indeed. Welcome again. Thank you for being with us. So let's kick it off with the main question of today. Like, what are the most pressing threats that you see in the ecosystem, especially from your perspective?
Well, it's a lot of what we just talked about today already. It is the volume and velocity of fraud. I've been in the fraud industry about 8 years, and what's really changed, especially in the past few years, is just this acceleration. There was a time where you'd have a fraud threat, you would put in controls, and then the next threat would come. And now, especially with the globalization, with the intensity of the technology, we're fighting, dozens of attacks, nation state funded, global, organized, highly organized fraud in the ecosystem now, which is a lot different than it was a few years ago. And every year I say that, expecting, all the different technology, right? It just is going to continue to increase.
No, 100%. I think we are hearing, this is the theme of today, actually. We are all hearing from all the participants the same themes about the fraud and concerns. So we have, as Mastercard, we have a fantastic partnership with Citizens, with you and your team specifically. Can you please elaborate for the audience how our partnership actually helped to develop solutions to the threats that you mentioned, or how we can accelerate the prevention of these?
Yeah, so the fraud prevention is really almost entirely dependent on access to data and insights. We heard that from our cybersecurity partners. And what we have with Mastercard is you have this broad network of data and intelligence. You're seeing transactions, billions of them all over the globe, and we have our transactions and being able to marry those insights together. And then we have a very common, I feel like we have a common focus on our customers and enabling good transactions all day, every day, but then getting that right interdiction when it is fraud or a riskier transaction. And the investments you've made, the partners we mutually share, like intersect, your investment in decision intelligence and modeling and data, I think has been a good marriage of where we are, which is really leaning into that data and technology and insights to fight fraud.
No, 100%. Thank you for this. But I think it's very important, like the partnerships, because at the end of the day, we are trying to secure the whole ecosystem, not only one partner or one network. Let's talk about scams. They mentioned in the previous panel. So last year alone, based on the FTC numbers, and U.S. customers lost $12.5 billion to scams. And these are only the reported numbers. The reality is actually harsher than this. Can you please maybe give some examples about how Citizens and Mastercard, we are collaborating to raise awareness to scams, and also how we can develop some proactive solutions to prevent scams before they happen?
Yes, and so we were just last week at the Global Anti-Scam Alliance Summit in DC, surrounded by professionals who are all together, fighting this fight of scams. And scams are unique from a transactional standpoint, because in most cases, the consumer is part of the transaction. So it has different signals than traditional fraud, where you can say, oh, that is a bad IP and that looks malicious. When it's a scam from a transactional perspective, it's going to look like the customer is initiating that transaction because they are. And so the way that we need to look at the data is entirely different. And again, it goes back to that breadth of information that Mastercard has and that we can marry with our own to really try to identify that pattern for that customer looks different. And we should proactively reach out to them with some education and see if they are involved in a scam. And then I think, education, we're both mutually focused. Mastercard's got a lot of education, as do we, really trying to keep the consumers aware of the different threats of scams out there. I mean, we see that all the time, the toll booth, texts that come through, like there's different, iterations that we're all impacted. And so it's really getting that word out to consumers, do not click on the link, do not fall for the scams.
I think that's a very fair point. At the end, the education starts with all the participants. It's not only the network, merchants, issuers, government. I think it's all, because at the end of the day, if the consumers don't know what to do or they're not informed enough, everybody is suffering, and it impacts the digital economy, because they are losing the trust to the digital economy, and they don't want to make any transactions anymore. And at the end, we all lose. So there was an interesting comment in the last panel that they thought that the fraud and cybersecurity is kind of operating in different places and is kind of silos, and which is a dream for the fraudsters, because as they are different silos, they can actually attack and they can abuse the opportunity. So, and the best way to break the silos, as you mentioned, is sharing the data, sharing intelligence. Can you give some example about how the sharing intelligence between different parties, a bank and a network, would be useful to fight the emerging trends or to be preventive about what's going to happen?
Yeah, so again, that's how we learn how fraud is, starting to pivot. We always want to be looking at what's changing in the ecosystem, and that's just not the transactional data that we might see in fraud. That is any data in the ecosystem. Who's, showing interest into your site? Who's, trying to log in? Where are those logins coming from? So it's a marriage of the cyber data as well as transactional fraud data, as well as a third, all of the external data that we can get as well to say that those are threats. And again, Mastercard has a global network, so that many participants use. So you might have a signal first that says this is fraud, and then we can benefit from that downstream.
100%. So we mentioned we have a great partnership, and we mentioned the last week of Global Anti-Scam Alliance. There's an organization between not only with Citizens, Mastercard, but all the other networks and all the issuers as well. What do you think would be the future for the collaboration? Because I think it's not only one bank, it's not only one network can fix this fraud problem, and cyber problem. What is the golden standard for collaboration, data sharing, in order to fight the good fight against fraud?
Yes, and I think it was mentioned earlier, we have ISACs too, right? So I think it's leveraging that. What we talked a lot about last week was whole of government and then public, private partnerships, right? It really is the whole of everyone. There's a global problem. I say fraudsters aren't brand specific. They're not looking for any one brand, or they're just looking for the weakest link to perpetuate their crimes. And so how do we as a whole ecosystem rally together and share our data to really fight the fight amongst all of us, because any weakness is weakness for all. And I just think about the insights in the last section. It's not even, now we're in a place where it's just not even our consumer. We're also working with our consumers' agents, right? So that concept of authentication and identity is going to be even blurred more as consumers want to pick up agentic commerce, which I think is going to become very popular faster than any of us want it to. And I almost died when he said almost 30 agents. People could have 30 agents, right? So that's 30 different entities I could be giving authorization to transact on my behalf. That from for a fraud perspective, that's the real acceleration of data, and how we're going to need to collaborate to keep track of that.
100%. When you think about the agents, how to do a know your agent, there is the dispute component, cyber component, AI component. No, 100%. So if I want to summarize what we have, the key takeaways: data sharing, intelligence sharing, collaboration, and education, customer education. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things, coming together. And then, from anyone who's in the ecosystem, just everyone needs to lean in, right? We can't have any white space between us. It is everyone's fight. And so if you're anywhere, whether it's telco, social media, whatever you have to bring to support the cause, I think it's a whole of the industry.
100%. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you,
everyone. We'll just cue a video for you.
AI is changing business by the minute, and cybercrime is changing with it. In the future, businesses that thrive will be the ones prepared for both. For more than 60 years, Mastercard has been trusted to secure the world's payments. Now, that legacy of security powers our newest frontier. Mastercard's cybersecurity and fraud prevention for enterprise uses an advanced AI-powered network to assess over 32 million cybersecurity risk events every day, protecting your business in the moment and securing your tomorrow, because a new era of growth demands a new standard of security. Get ready for what's next at mastercard.com/cybersecurity.
It's good to see everybody and continue with this afternoon's events. So 8 years at Yahoo, 4 years at Meta Platforms, more than a decade at Microsoft, though kind of on different ends. 6 months ago, you walk in at Adobe.
Good, you got it all right.
What's the challenge that you're presented with when you walk through those doors on the first day?
First of all, I'm greeted by a very passionate team who really cares about security. And then the second thing, as I dug deeper, even through my interview process, was Adobe is very much an AI-first company. Adobe has its own models, Firefly models. We have the entire AI stack. and we have to protect it all.
It seems like even the other companies that you worked at in previous lives, Microsoft, Meta Platforms, these are now AI companies. But how is what you're doing at Adobe different than what you were doing at these other companies?
Yeah, I feel like I'm pretty blessed with my career journey, so to speak, because when I was at Yahoo, I was doing identity for everyone. And at that time, Yahoo was the company. Then when I was at Skype, it was initially the consumer offering that I was supposed to be protecting, and then later on we added enterprise, which we know as Teams today. Moving to Meta, very much like their social offerings. And then at Microsoft, protecting two major clouds, Azure and M365. And now here we have three clouds, our document cloud, creative cloud, and marketing clouds, both for our consumers as well as enterprises. So I feel like it's coming full circle where I have gotten all these different diverse experiences, and now I'm get to leverage them all collectively.
So here you are at Adobe, and it's your responsibility not just to keep the company safe, but to keep Adobe's customers safe. If you put yourself in the position of an attacker, what is it that you want from Adobe?
Well, attackers are always looking for the best ROI they can get. Unfortunately, we are living in a world where it's a business for them. And when they look at not just Adobe, any industry, I would say, they are looking for exactly the same thing. Like, what can I get out from this company that I can sell and make money? So what are our crown jewels? That's where we start. Like, what are the critical assets that we are there to protect? Our customers are storing their brand assets, their creative assets. We are supposed to be protecting those. A lot of the marketing material. And how can we protect those assets? And also when customers are leveraging our AI stack, as I mentioned, we have to protect the entire AI stack. And with AI, there are lots of emerging threats. We have heard from a lot of panelists before, and Mandeep did an amazing job of covering some of the AI-related attacks. But like cross-prompt injection attack, XPIA as we call it, it's net new. It's like internet all over again. I don't know how many of you folks, I'm dating myself here probably. When we started with internet, it was like all XSS cross-site scripting. And we would wake up every morning with like, oh, net new XSS, let's mow the lawn. Then the next day, more XSS, let's mow the lawn. Now it's like with XPIA, the same thing. So what attackers are able to do is they can put certain prompts, either through the users or directly, and they can exfiltrate data. So that's net new attack because our LLMs do not distinguish between trusted prompts and untrusted prompts. So it's a fundamental issue across the board.
So what could an attacker do with an untrusted prompt?
So there was this one particular attack that a researcher showed a lot of attention on, where they were able to inject a prompt and exfiltrate a lot of sensitive data through that prompt from the backend systems, because the LLM did not distinguish between whether they should execute that prompt or not. It just went ahead, it took it as a command, and it executed. And it exfiltrated a whole bunch of data. So we have to come up with net new mitigations.
Would you say that, you've worked in a lot of different contexts in technology. Would you say that where we are right now, I think a lot of people would agree it's the most exciting place that we've been in a generation with AI, but would you also say that it's the most vulnerable place that we've been?
Yes and no. And the reason I'm saying yes and no is if you decide to sit on a sideline and don't do anything about it, then probably you are in a more vulnerable situation. But if you are not sitting on sidelines, you are participating and you are very actively learning and adding mitigations and defenses throughout your tech stack, then probably not. And the playing field has always been this, I would say, unlevel for defenders. But now, if you are not going to use AI to your favor, it's going to get even worse. So I encourage people to participate.
Well, you mentioned this idea of Adobe protecting the crown jewels of your customers. And just to remind everybody, 99% of Fortune 100 companies are using AI in an Adobe app right now. So whether or not you're seeing stuff that is created on Adobe's platform. Coca-Cola, Estee Lauder, IBM, Qualcomm, the list just goes on. YouTube creators are using it. When you talk about the risk of these crown jewels actually being accessed and shared at a moment where these clients don't want them shared, the risk, I think, to me, sounds like a lot of it lies with the customer and the end user and making sure that they are following safe and secure protocols. That's out of your control.
Well, the basic hygiene for security, nobody can contest that. Everybody has to follow that, whether it's customers, whether you are a supplier. And the whole supply chain issue that we have been talking about, that all comes into play. Because at the end of the day, we as Adobe, we also have suppliers. And when there are any breaches, we depend on them to make sure that they notify us. So we can go and immediately patch our systems. You heard from the first panel that at the end of the day, the pace at which you can react and respond, it really matters. So that basic hygiene, even for our customers, is really important. Because if they are not going to patch their own systems, and one of the examples I'll give you, this is for the Gen AI agents. Sometimes customers are a little worried that, and this is from my time at Microsoft, customers were coming to us and they were asking questions like, hey, I feel like a lot of my data is being now accessed by these agents. I'm like, well, you need to have the right access controls. Your obscurity cannot be the security. Just because you did not have the right access controls and now these agents are finding and replying with answers, that doesn't mean that data was protected ever.
So what would you say is the weak link in the scenario that you described, or the weak link when it comes to your world?
It is still the basic hygiene.
So more so than the supply chain? You're talking about, you say basic hygiene, you mean our own habits as human beings?
Our own habits, how many people in this room, with a show of hands, have migrated to fish-resistant MFA?
Let's just...
Two are Adobe people here.
Let's just define fish-resistant MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Correct.
What's fish-resistant versus non-fish-resistant?
So if you are just doing, say, SMS-based MFA, that is very phishable. I can ask you, hey, can you give me your OTP that you have fished?
Your one-time password.
Yeah, one-time password. I can ask you for it, and I can punch it in on your behalf and do account takeover. When you say it is phish resistant, it has to be in a way that it is tied to your device, tied to your biometrics. So nobody should be able to phish it. And that's what companies should be moving to.
We have done that at Bloomberg. I'm just going to say.
Wonderful.
I'm raising my hand here. Okay. But there are a lot of companies that I use in my own world where it's still text messages over and over again.
Yep. And
that's out of our control. As customers, it's out of our control. As a large
as a solution
company,
provider.
Yeah. Can you go to a customer of yours and say you have to take this and make this phish resistant?
Absolutely.
For us to do business with you, is that part of building a resilient culture?
That, and what we can also do is we can provide them the monitoring and alerting capabilities where we can show it to them that, look, these many of your customers or your employees got phished. And please, if you do not prioritize this is the risk you are carrying.
So if we think about it then, if that's from the perspective of your customers and your clients, there's also the perspective of internally what you're doing at Adobe to build this culture. And when you and I spoke just last week to prepare for this, you talked a little bit about what the team does to try to essentially fool Adobe employees in order to get them to hand over their credentials as a learning opportunity. So talk a little bit about that, because that has to do with building a culture of resiliency and a secure framework.
Yeah, a few notable things I want to share about this, because when I joined Adobe, coming from some of the other companies where I've seen different programs run for employee training, I found Adobe's program to be very unique. because we do not do a phishing or anti-phishing campaign once a year that like many companies do. What we do is we do it throughout the year. And we take the flavor of the month or the week. Like if November was our benefits enrollment program, our phishing campaign was totally around that. And people were like, they had to really squint to see when it was us phishing or it was the real benefits email that they had to sign up for. So in December, we are doing something about, hey, here is a few iTunes card if you do this. And so we are keeping...
Just a heads up, Adobe employees, it's not a real iTunes card.
Yeah, don't fall for it.
So what happens if they do fall for it? What's the training process then?
Then we definitely reach out to them. We say, hey, you should not have clicked on this, and here is a little bit of a training program. Please go click on it, take this training for 15 minutes, and then next week they will again go through some of these phishing emails. So we are making sure that we are using AI to amp up our program too. Then second thing that we did as we were starting to learn about AI is the program we called AI Guild. So as part of that AI Guild program, we picked a small group of employees and we said, go free form, learn about AI. What can we do with it? How can we protect ourselves? And as a result, they came back with solutions like one of the solutions that they built. There they feed in the threat intelligence from our partners, the one that we ourselves gather, and they feed all of that threat intelligence, and then this tool reads all the indicators of compromise, like 100 plus, and they scan our entire environment. And within 5 to 15 minutes, it will tell us where the weak spots are, where we need to add more detections and patch immediately. So this whole thing used to take us days and weeks, and now it is in less than 15 minutes. So that's how we are using AI to go so much more faster.
In your world and in the outages that you've experienced, why have they happened in general? I mean, each one is different,
Yep.
but what is typically the cause of an outage? And you know, we can include Adobe, we can include the previous places you've worked, but the caveats, you've only been at Adobe for 6 months.
Most of the time, it is either a misconfiguration or a code change that wasn't tested for a certain edge case. And as a result, that edge case really happened in production, and then it had a domino effect, and it took down the entire system. So I think this is not the last time. This is not the first time. It will continue to happen. And we have to protect ourselves.
How often is it an external actor, somebody or an entity trying to get something?
I haven't lately seen too much of this caused by a nation state sponsored or something. It is mostly self-inflicted, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But
and that's where you argue that AI has a real opportunity to improve.
Correct. Also, we heard a little bit about resiliency today, and we need to really focus on that. Like when we are providing services, we are exploring how can we not be just on one particular cloud? How can we go have our services be on multiple clouds? So that even if one cloud goes down, we have like 2 to 3 other clouds where we can fail over right away, and our customers do not see an impact.
And you mean multiple cloud providers, so different companies like...
Correct.
You know, okay, so...
Microsoft, Google, Amazon.
Okay, so, and also those companies having locations in different areas, so they're resilient as well.
Correct.
Okay, so if you think about the culture of resiliency in security and safety that you're trying to build at Adobe, what is left for you to do? Like, where are the big areas that you want to focus on? You're 6 months into this. What do you need to do?
My key priority is AI, and it has multiple elements to it. One is, how do we continue to secure the AI features we are putting in our products and services? We want to make sure those are secure by default, secure by design. So our customers do not have to think twice. They can just safely and securely use those features. The second thing is, how are we leveraging AI to defend ourselves? Because our threat actors are using AI left, right, front, center. And us not using it is not a good thing. So that's the second piece. And then the third thing is, we want our employees to be leveraging AI. whether it is vibe coding, whether it is building tools and services or agents, all of that. And it's my team's responsibility to provide the security guardrails as they are doing all of that.
So how long does it take you if your team, or if a team comes to you and says, we want to use this new tool, we need you to create the guardrails for it? What's the process of doing that?
We call it paved roads. It's a unique term we have come up with, because what we are saying is, really good that you want to build something new and you have come to us. Now, go build whatever you're building and we'll provide you guidance. But in the meantime, in parallel, we will build this paved road that you can speed on. Because when you put brakes in the car, you can use that car at a much higher speed. That's the same thing that we do. We provide those paved roads, so using those configurations, they can build features faster.
But if it's not fast enough, some people are going to use those tools outside of the preferred way that you want them to be used. I've seen this happen at different jobs.
Yeah, which is totally okay. And actually we encourage it, because what it does is it builds that culture of security. Then they are not afraid to come to us. Even if what they want to do is totally not what we are providing off the shelf, we encourage you to do it. Let's still have a conversation, because we can secure whatever you are using.
So we only have about a minute left, but I just want to end on you providing some ideas, some actions for the rest of the people here, everybody watching right now, given the experience that you've had and what you're doing at Adobe now, to build a culture of diligent security. What is the right way to do it? How do you build that framework?
I would say if you are not using AI right now, please go explore it, use it more. Whether it is for security, whether it is for speeding up whatever features you have, just pick one pilot project and invest a little bit more. The other challenge you might run into, which sometimes I also see with many other organizations too, is there's no single place where you can go and say, I will send my employees here, get them trained on AI and security. You have to spend time, you have to explore, get your hands dirty. Do not shy away from doing that. And you will learn a lot, you will enjoy. And I promise you will be the next person writing those blogs and writing those white papers. So please do that. And we need to collectively make all of this AI space more secure, because it's not going away. It's on to us to make it more secure for everyone else.
Anshul Gupta, Chief Security Officer of Adobe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating discussion, and I feel like it's a perfect stage for us, to explore this whole concept of AI agents that's been the common theme so far. So maybe, Kelly, I'll start with you. Given Salesforce is one of the biggest application providers out there, you guys have an agentic offering. Talk to us about how you are thinking about the data access that you are giving to your agentic offering, given the concerns that we have heard so far.
Yeah, so with Salesforce's Agentforce offering, there's 4 concepts I would like to kind of explain. One is your agent is just another user. So when you set up your agent, you want to make sure that user is set up with only the access it needs. So setting the permissions, don't allow it to have any more data than it needs, so that it can only access the data that it has access to and no more. The second one is think about how can you trust the data that it brings back. So with Agentforce, the agents will provide you with the source of the information, when that source was last updated, and any compliance information regarding that source. The third piece is what we call the Agentforce trust layer. So you're looking at how is the LLM looking at the data? The data that is provided by the agent is never stored with our LLMs. It's never the sensitive data is never put in to the LLM. It's all redacted or tokenized. And then the fourth thing is that there's always a human in the loop. The human is there to make those critical decisions on behalf of the agent, so that you can make sure that the agent is not taking actions that you would not want it to take.
Got it. And Troy, I mean, at Citi, I'm sure you guys have a big security operations center that where you're getting feeds from all the security providers. So how has that changed given this new threat that obviously everyone acknowledges, but I would love to hear what sort of changes you've made at the SOC level.
Yeah, sure. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. It's great to be here. Look, I'm quite a positive person. And so I like to think that this creates a wonderful opportunity for us. You talked about that data, like the data layer. We're getting more data now. We're able to process it in faster ways. We're able to get stronger insights out of that data. I think one of the key things that we're thinking through and have made some really rapid progress on already is we like to call AI not so much artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. So how do we get it to our analysts, make them smarter, make them faster, and then obviously protect the bank in a fundamentally different way. And so we think that the automated SOC of the future is going to be agent-driven, as you've talked about, and it's only going to accelerate the mission that we have to do.
But do you find yourself ingesting a lot more data now because of LLMs?
I actually think it's almost the other way. The AI is helping us to understand the right data that we need. And so instead of ingesting too much, we're able to really narrow it down to just the data that's most relevant and most useful for us. I think data is a challenge. Compute then becomes the other challenge, though. How do you use that data, fast enough? Is going to be an interesting challenge.
And Rob, I mean, we talked about, how Microsoft has a big security business. They have been one of the earliest ones to launch this Copilot, agentic functionality. Is security all native to it? I mean, how much do you have to kind of deploy security that's focused on the threats posed by attackers who could use LLMs themselves?
Well, I think we've talked today, thanks for the time. We've talked today about a lot of the two sides of the coin. How are you protecting AI? And then how are you using AI to supercharge the defenders? And I think as you get into that second bucket, as we think about how can we use AI to do a lot of the innovative and accelerating things that we talked about, make humans more effective and efficient, there is this underlying theme of the attackers are already doing it. And they are doing it at scale, and they are looking for new and innovative ways to go about that. So if you're not prepared to keep pace and even go faster, you will fall behind. But there's hope, because I agree with the comments. Like, this is a big data problem, and this is a place where we can shift the landscape between attackers and defenders, because the defenders should have access to more data, more visibility, and drive better insight. So it leaves me actually optimistic if you're willing to keep pace.
And this whole concept of a security copilot, like, what does it do for the enterprise?
Oh, well, I think it's step one in a journey around how do you transform the SOC experience. And AI in general has a number of generations. In the first one, let's just talk about how we give assistance to help people. And that's what Security Copilot did in its first instance, answer questions. And then we have agents to go off and do tasks, and we've already released some of those, like a triage agent that will look for some of those phish emails we were talking about earlier. Is it a good alert or a bad alert? But that's leading to systems of agents that work together, and that really becomes a network that the SOC analysts can take advantage of and use to supercharge the activities that they do.
Got it. So it sounds like you're saying the number of phishing attacks should go down because the triage agents
The phishing attacks will go up, always up and to the right. I'm 100% confident of that. The goal is that the analysts spend less time. And we actually see that using this triage agent I was talking about. They're spending dramatically less time and getting more accurate results at the same time.
Okay. And Kelly, maybe at the identity level, that's a problem that it was mentioned in one of the prior panels as well, password protection and identity protection. How are you guys sort of focused on the next gen of identity protection, given every user may have multiple agents, as we have discussed so far?
Yeah, so it goes back to making sure that the agent only has the access that that user has access to, and the agent won't have any additional access than the user using the agent does. So that way the user is not getting any data just because they're using one agent. Because of that agent's access, they can only get the access that that user has that is using that agent.
And there's no notion of passwords anywhere, or even the multi-factor authentication that was discussed?
Yeah, I mean, with the user having the multi-factor authentication and zero trust is definitely a foundation of leveraging any agent. You want to make sure, like, you build secure by design at every layer. And so you want to make sure that you have the multi-factor authentication and the zero trust architecture to help protect the data with the agents.
Same question for you, Troy. The multiplicative effect of every user having, 30, 40 agents. How do you solve for that at Citi?
Yeah, look, I don't think it'll be 30 or 40 agents. I think it'll be hundreds, to be honest. Look, we've started thinking in the future, I'm not going to be asking for a person to hire. I'm going to be asking for an agent. I'm not going to go to our partners here and say, can I get a bit of software? I'm going to say, can I get an agent that delivers, that service, that feature? And so more and more, I think there's going to be different types of agents. You talked about some of the examples of the co-pilot. There's going to be agents that act on behalf of a person, and we're going to treat that as a person. There's going to be agents that are not people. They're not going to be related to a person. They are going to be fully autonomous at some point. They're going to get intelligent. They're going to start learning and reasoning. And we're going to have to think through those agents in a very, very fundamentally different way. Think about something like forensics. Was it the person who created the agent? Was it the agent? Was it the system of agents that decided to do something? Was it the agent learning and then applying its own intelligence? It's going to be a very fascinating.
But you don't think identity will be a challenge in deploying agents?
Identity is going to be a huge challenge, but I think we're going to have to tailor the identity to each of those different types of agents and treat them fundamentally differently than we have in the past.
Got it. And Rob, I mean, SIM is a market that has security information, event management. It's tied to observability, and it's something that enterprises have used a lot with big data lake and all that. How does that change in a world where LLMs can really sift through a needle in the haystack?
I mean, the question almost answers itself. Yeah. This is where we're going. We have to find a way to make more and more data available, because security is intrinsically a big data problem. It is the needle in the haystack. Where was the attack? Where's the vulnerability? What do I have to do next? And the more we can make all of that data affordable, so we're not facing questions of which ones could I afford to ingest into my SIM, but just keep it all and let the AI reason over that big data set and tell you what are the things that are going to matter the most. That's the kind of reasoning that it's actually really, really useful for as a giant probabilistic stochastic model to get that group together insight. And so I'm excited about it. This is how we change the game to the advantage of the defense.
So the existing SIM systems are going to be no good? Everything will be powered by LLM going forward?
The SIM systems need to provide and integrate with a broader layering of how do these tools and data sets work together. So it has to be built on top of a broad data lake, and the tools need to know how to interoperate with that information directly. That creates an environment where you can release all this data to be useful for AI.
But we don't have unlimited compute. In fact, we keep hearing everyone is compute constrained. So how do you get to decide where you're going to use LLMs versus where you're going to be just save the compute?
Well, this is where you need to spend a ton of time experimenting and evaluating. I mean, we're working on this. All of our partners are working on this as well. What is the most effective use of these agentic techniques and AI in the face of large data sets? Where do we see the real payoff? And it has to be more than just we tried a bunch of fluffy AI things. It has to be grounded in the evaluation of, did it work? Did it actually make your analysts more effective? And did it give you the business outcome of the company being more secure?
Can I go a little further?
Yeah, please.
So I agree with what you're saying. To go a little further, the way to make it not a big data problem is to not need the data. And so what I mean by that is the more you can use AI to drive truly preventative controls, shift left in the life cycle, as we've always talked about, if the use case itself can detect that it's a prompt inject, block it. I don't need to send that to the SOC. I don't need to tell an analyst. I don't need to fire on glass. I don't even need to know about that data in the SOC. Cut that, right? And then I'm starting to look at anomalies and things that are
There
not
won't be any
being
false
blocked.
positives.
Correct, right? That's the stuff I need to get to the SOC. That's what I need to fire. So restrict the data down to the SOC and turn it away from a big data problem, I think, is the answer.
Okay. And we talked about prompt injection, and it seems that is the biggest threat. So, Kelly, from your standpoint, how much time are you spending in training when it comes to just, making sure, like, you capture the set of good prompts or prompts that are malicious in intent? Like, is there an element of training in terms of preventing prompt attacks?
I mean, you're definitely looking at training and identifying all the different threats that could be leveraged against agents and helping to build up that security around the agents. Prompt injection is definitely probably the scariest threat out there right now when it comes to agents or even across the security threat model with, if compared phishing and ransomware and prompt injection. I would say prompt injection is probably the one that I would be most concerned with because it's the hardest to detect.
Like, what are the guardrails that you have put in place at the Salesforce level around these LLMs so that they can end up showing some data that you don't want? You said controls are there, but still, I guess, is there anything else that goes beyond the data control in terms of preventing these prompt injection?
It really comes down to the Agentforce trusted layer and how we work with the LLMs. And so it's providing that security to prevent, and as much as we can, any of the prompt injections. But it's all built into the foundation of how we secure Salesforce across the board with the security at every layer.
Mm-hmm. And Troy, I mean, for you, like, how have you thought about guardrails in general in terms of I'm guessing you are using multiple LLMs within the enterprise level, and it depends on the use case. Maybe for a security or a coding agent type of use case where your developers are using, have you thought about certain guardrails specific to the use of coding agents or DevOps at the enterprise level?
Yeah, we have. Look, it's quite public. City's gone large on AI, and so we've got broad tools that are available to everybody in the whole organization. They tend to be the chatbots and the sort of the more generic use cases. The guardrails you need there are the equivalent, right? You don't actually need too much because we're not trying to protect too much. As you get narrowed down into very specific use cases, and again, we've been public about some of them, that tend to do your more sensitive business processes, that's where you need the stronger guardrails. And so as you're talking about prompt inject, that's where a dedicated prompt inject capability is really important. That's where, like, teaching the model what good looks like, teaching the use case itself or the user interface or the API or teaching it what good looks like is critical, and then that last piece of firing to the analyst. So look, I don't know, cybersecurity is pretty simple. I've always thought that there's a set of capabilities that you need to build. You need to understand the threat, as you rightly talked about, and then constantly keep learning with the best people. AI hasn't fundamentally changed that. It's still basically the same game, albeit it's getting more challenging.
Yeah. And Rob, do you think we'll have a cybersecurity specific foundational model, given you guys have been involved with frontier model training and fine tuning? So is that something we should expect?
Well, I will say at this point we're trying everything, and so it's a giant yes and. As we push forward in how do we make the best use of AI and LLMs inside of security, there's a whole portfolio of techniques to bring to bear, from fine-tuning the prompts to thinking about how to use improved RAG, to thinking about how we can fine-tune the models themselves or use small language models at the right place. And what we've found is you get dramatically different results with different kinds of techniques. So you don't want to just take one magic silver bullet and throw that at everything. You really need to get into the details of, okay, now I am doing an investigation agent. I need to evaluate all the models I possibly could and all the environments that that runs in to deliver the best possible outcome.
Kelly, I mean, prior to this whole LLM security, how much did Salesforce invest in cybersecurity, and how much the focus has changed because of LLMs in terms of the cybersecurity spend at Salesforce?
So the cybersecurity spend, I would say, hasn't changed drastically. We're becoming more efficient. Because we're leveraging agents, we're able to put spending elsewhere because we're becoming more efficient in how we do our security operations. We have an incident response agent that I implemented within my security operations center that has saved us, we've had over 60,000 prompts, and it's saved us over 4,500 hours, which is equivalent to 2 FTEs. Now, from a security operations perspective, I'm not necessarily trying to save that headcount. I'm trying to get my analysts to be able to do those more complex tasks, while the agents can do more of the lower level manual tasks. And so that is allowing us to, save money, but also get faster in how we detect and respond to the threats.
But in terms of native security that comes within the software versus where you would use a partner, has that changed? Has that equation changed in any way?
No, I wouldn't say that it's really changed how we use the software today and how we build Salesforce. We have, the controls that are built into the platform that we call the invisibles. Those are the items that the controls that we're doing on behalf of all of our customers. And then we have the configurables, which are the things that the customers can do, like implementing multi-factor authentication and implementing IPLL listing. And then there's the enhanceables, which are for the customers that have additional security needs that may have more regulations. And those are really how we are continuing to build security across the board and make that shared responsibility model a partnership between us and our customers.
And Troy, I mean, for the longest time, I've heard talent has been a real problem when it comes to finding, cybersecurity professionals who are very good at, preventing stuff. Do you still find that to be the case, or has that environment changed in any way?
Look, it's still the case. We always like to say cyber's a job for life, right? It's not going away. I think that remains true. I think it's the skill set that's changing, right? We're starting to look for people that, are prompt engineers or agent engineers. So I think the skill set is going to change. And I like what you said then, Kelly, that you think about the SOC, the level 1 analyst probably goes away at some point in the future. But that creates space and capacity, like you rightly say. Can we do more threat hunting? Can we do more red teaming? Hopefully. So, look, I think it changes the skill set. So the talent challenge is going to be there, but it's a different problem that I think we faced in the past.
Right. And when it comes to just consolidating the different products, I mean, my understanding is a large enterprise like Citi uses, anywhere from 50 to 70 security products, and we saw that slide on vendor fragmentation. Do you think that changes now in the world of LLMs and AI?
Look, I think we, like everyone, will continue to use whatever's best. Cyber's it's too important, right? We also talk about the defense and depth strategy. You never just want one capability to protect you. You want multiple layers of defense. And so that means we will continue to build our own. We'll continue to to leverage best of breed. We'll continue to partner really strongly with, friends like to either side. I don't think that changes. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. And Rob, when it comes to the types of attacks, do you think certain types of attacks are easier to protect against now? I mean, we talked about phishing and passwords and, prompt injection is obviously new. But because of AI, do you feel certain types of attacks would be easier to protect against with the capabilities that you have right now?
Well, I do think it's a force multiplier that helps the SOC and the security team do better and go faster for everything. And so it raises the bar, just like it's raising the bar for the attackers. See the conversation on keeping up. There's one unique and interesting aspect about AI and LLMs, which has to do with social engineering. And we've talked about it a lot here. Social engineering is tricky because attackers just need to operate at scale and get one employee to be tricked. And that makes it very hard to protect against. That's a place where I think AI and LLMs can do more different things than we've done in the past, looking things for like intent and tone and did this email have a sense of urgency? And we've started to build that into the tools, and that is making a big difference for protecting the individual humans.
Yeah, and given Microsoft has, a big business in cybersecurity, and you guys operate across different parts, the different segments that we saw in terms of the cybersecurity market, would certain segment increase in importance? Like one of my takeaways was observability increases in importance because of LLMs. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would, but it's because that intrinsically goes back to having the data so the AI can see what's going on is part of how it solves the problem. As I look at all that fragmentation, I think what it points towards is a need for defenders to be going faster and to make sure that they aren't falling into the gaps between any of those tools because they do need to go faster. That becomes a critical problem for us to think about and solve. And we've talked about it a bit. There's a whole new category on protecting AI itself. And that is a brand new domain that everyone needs to be thinking about coherently.
Mm-hmm. So I know we have a couple of minutes left. So Kelly, for you, AI for security. I mean, so far, I think bulk of our discussion has been security for AI. Do you think we'll get at a point where AI can automate a lot of the security in the next 12 to 24 months?
I don't know about in the next 12 to 24 months. I think that, probably closer to the 24 months. There's still a lot of things that security teams are trying to figure out and how we leverage AI the right way because of having that human in the loop and making those critical decisions. A lot of some of the larger security operations teams out there are really trying to figure out how do you become a true agentic SOC? How do you get the agents to work with agents and AI to work with agents? Every security vendor out there is building AI into their tools, and how do you get that all connected so that you can move faster? So I think a lot of the security tasks that we have to do absolutely can be, you can leverage automation, AI, and agents to remove them. But from a human having to take those. But I don't think any security team is really ready to just say that an agent or AI can run their entire security operations.
Same question for you, Troy.
It's the same answer. Agentic is it is the opportunity.
Rob, any
I agree with my colleagues.
Okay.
The one thing on top of that is that it is back to making it real. And it is about getting grounded, what really works, and seeing security teams work with it. That's where we're pushing.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank me in joining my fellow panelists.
So I just want to start with some sample headlines from the Bloomberg. These are Bloomberg stories over the past couple of weeks. Cloudflare says Friday morning outage wasn't due to cyber attack. Everybody here knows what I'm talking about with that one. Goldman Sachs pauses planned $1.3 billion mortgage bond sale for CyrusOne, the data center operator that supports CME Group, after a major outage that hit one of the world's largest derivative exchanges. So real implications when it comes to M&A as far as cybersecurity goes. U.S. slashes pay incentives at already weakened cyber agency. So that's sort of the background and the context that we're dealing with here. 6 years at Google. Before that, Department of Homeland Security. Before that, you were Director of Critical Infrastructure, Cybersecurity at the White House. Before that, more time at Homeland Security. Before that, the U.S. Army. We're going to talk a little bit about your background later and the culture that you're trying to build at Google Cloud. But I want to start with a story, something that happened from some cybersecurity perspective, a hacking or an outage. And you were just like, it happened, and you were just like, okay, this is bad.
Yeah, I think, well, more recent. I'll start with some recent ones, and then we can always.
It can be top secret too.
Oh.
You can feel free to break some news here.
I will not break news. You know, I think, well, probably one of the most challenging ones that I dealt with was actually quite a while ago in the government, which was the Office of Personnel Management, and where over a series of time we eventually discovered that some other country had taken millions of some very sensitive documents and fingerprinting, so what government employees use to apply for their security clearances. And they had taken millions of those documents. And it was one of those things that sort of unfolded like a car accident where the news just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I think, and the important thing that I also want to highlight for this is sometimes a lesson that people take away from these things is, well, you just should like not try to find out the bad things, because that's what happened is as you were and as we were sort of improving the security and improving the detection is when you started to find the bad things. And so, you know, long story in terms of how different people were held accountable that I have opinions about, but you know, in the end, it was organizations dealing with, what did it say when we call it legacy software, and legacy infrastructure just means old. And so, you know, the government dealing with some of the oldest infrastructure. And so an organization that was trying to do the right thing, that was doing the right thing, and rolling out better detection, rolling out better capabilities, and finding out some, you know, more and more horrific of what was lost, and eventually having to go public and deal with it. And so I think that one has always stuck with me precisely for that reason, because in the end, you know, as most security professionals will know, it's the security team that gets held accountable when something happens, which is a whole issue. Yes, it's true, the security leaders need to be held accountable. The ultimate owners of an agency or business need to be held accountable. But to disincentivize the very sort of security work that allows you to have that observability and to be able to see what is actually happening is a trend that is concerning. And so that was probably my most like, oh, this is really happening. There's a few of those. But that one really stuck with me because of the accountability, the deep desire for the people to hold people accountable that ended up leading to people reconsidering whether they should be investing as much in security because it went badly.
So we're gonna come back to, just in the last couple of minutes, your time in government. But before we do that, I want to hit on a little bit of what you're doing at Google Cloud and just set up the context for us. I mean, everybody here is familiar with Google Cloud and the products and services it offers, but I mean, in the context of what you do, billions of users, millions of websites globally, what's the biggest misunderstanding that people have about the scale and complexity and what it takes to actually keep this thing up and running?
I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or just it's sort of hard to contemplate. And so, for example, we have billions of users, and I'll touch on all of Google, that interact with all of our various services. We have services deployed in over 200 countries. In order to do that, we have 7.75 million miles of cable, subsea and terrestrial, just to support that alone, let alone all of the energy and all the other infrastructure that goes into that. We process over 20 petabytes of data every single day. Like it's hard to, these numbers are so big, it's almost like hard to contemplate. So I was like looking, so that's an equivalent of 2 million gigabytes a minute.
Wow.
Like, and it wasn't even until I came to Google that I was like, oh, wow, this is like enormous. And then, of course, it's our responsibility to figure out how to protect all of that. If you think of, we were talking about phishing resistance earlier, which we have invested a lot in. Gmail alone automatically blocks 120 million phishing attempts every day. Like, that's awesome.
And still get things get through.
No. We're pretty good at it.
Okay. I have this really persistent one that I'll talk to you about later. They keep changing it. It's really annoying.
Yeah, so, and there's a lot of that, just thinking about the scale of the network and the infrastructure that was built to support, what we now call Workspace and Gmail and YouTube and all of these things, and now we offer as cloud. It's immense. It's mind-boggling to the extent that they were able to engineer something that works like this with low latency and low cost. It's just...
Well, and the thing that just occurred to me is when they were building this out, like when Gmail became available to us, I think, as consumers of a certain age, like around 40, you're like, wait a second, we can have free email that has unlimited storage. But a lot of us have that same email address that we've had for close to 20 years at this point. The threats against that have evolved so much over that period of time. So it wasn't like, that product or any Google product or any Google Cloud product was built when it was first built with what could be attempted right now in mind. So how do you, it's not like, you're not like backfilling, but how do you make sure that the legacy services are actually protected?
Well, we don't think in terms of legacy in that way. So one of the things that attracted me to come to Google was the scale and impact that you can have with that sort of reach. And the second thing was their continued recognition of the importance of security and reliability. And building that into the culture. And investing in those things and recognizing that you can, and in many cases they innovated, and I'm saying they because I wasn't there when this happened, so I can't claim credit for it. But thinking about how do you deliver high quality services at a global scale with low latency and low cost, but be able to continue to ensure on a regular basis that security and reliability is embedded in everything that you do. And so a lot of times you'll hear people talk about how you have to trade off speed for security or speed for reliability, and I don't think that's true. It does mean that you have to change the way that an organization prioritizes and invests, and it's not something that you can just sort of do it once. You have to continually invest in that, and you have to think about the incentives in your organization, and that's one of the things that I think Google has done really well, and not just doing it for themselves, being able to then externalize that through various mechanisms.
So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of threats and attacks and agentic AI, for example. And this has been brought up a couple times, but the recent example about a month ago with Anthropic, the company said they disrupted a highly sophisticated AI-led espionage campaign that used their Claude tool. Here's what Anthropic said: the attackers used AI's agentic capabilities to an unprecedented degree, using AI not just as an advisor, but to execute the cyber attack themselves. Was this like a crossing of the Rubicon?
I'd probably future folks can say whether that was it. I guess what I would say is generally, I think of AI, or where we're at with AI right now, in generative AI, as an inflection point for security, for sure. And a lot of people have talked about it already, so maybe won't rehash some of those things. But the idea that the advantage could get to the defender, I think is a real thing. Now, is it also going to the offense? Of course. But when you think of security in the amount of noise that is generated in security, and what AI is good at, right, is being able to distill that signal from that noise. And previous panelists talked about being able to have analysts that can focus on those higher level tasks and using agents to filter out all of that signal and noise. Of course, that doesn't mean it's easy to do right. But I do think it's that moment, if we can harness it as a community. It's not just individual companies, but harnessing it as a community. And we're doing a lot of work in that space. But yes, for sure. Whether that was, what happened with Claude is Rubicon. I think there's a lot of things that are going on. And I do think it's, is the community going to come together to embrace what is available or potentially available, and be able to leverage that for good against those who would leverage it for bad?
Who has the advantage right now?
Well, I always think the offense has the advantage. But, I come from Wisconsin where we believe in a strong defense. And we do win championships every now and then with a good defense. I see scenarios where it's changing, right? Where you see, AI-powered security capabilities, whatever domain, security operations, right? Where they are able to both detect, process, and mitigate issues. And at the rate, billions of these. And so it's, again, the scale is mind-boggling. But that we have to do it right. We have to do it in a way that's explainable, and we have to do it in a way that's standardized, and that is open for all. And so when we're making decisions, or the agents are making decisions on our behalf, we can they're being guided properly, and in a way that is generally accepted and understood by the community.
I promised we'd come back to your time in public service, and I think it's fair to say your entire career up until 2020, when you started working at Google, was in the public sector. White House, DHS, Army. You probably work around a lot of people who've never worked in the public sector and have worked in tech their whole lives. Culturally, what do you bring, and what do they bring to you?
I think, well, in one way, I remember all the time in government, everybody would come to me and say, oh, the private sector is so much more efficient, and you guys are so slow. And I was like, that's not totally true, guys.
You actually have the experience.
Yeah, the private sector is not some magical land where everything happens instantaneously and there's no bureaucracy. That was sort of shocking for me. And that's fine. Bureaucracy is good to some extent. But I think, some of the things that I bring is, I would say for Google, this is maybe a little bit more unique to Google. Google is very engineering first company, right? And in thinking about how do you design a solution that, that scales, that makes, humans' life easier, ideally trying to engineer humans out of the process as much as possible. And but I will say sometimes that means that we tend to look at everything through that lens. And so I think a lot of times what I bring is, one, a deeper understanding of governments and where regulators and governments might be coming from and their thinking of risk and the risk that they're trying to manage and how they see different companies working together. And then also bringing there's ways to bring stakeholders together. And then combining that with a strong desire and capability for engineers to be able to, okay, how can I engineer better solutions? I think it comes to a really unique sort of set of outcomes when we can do that together.
So I'm going to break the rules here because we're going to run out of time. But I have to ask you, because of your time in government, because of what you did in the Army, what you saw in the White House, what, from a cybersecurity perspective, keeps you up at night?
I think I'm going to say it's a mix between cybersecurity and reliability, because I think a lot of the most impactful things may not necessarily be from a malicious perspective, as was talked about earlier. And I think the thing that keeps me up at night the most is we're now dealing with such a complex ecosystem in so many different players and so many different dependencies, right? And that there's a dependency somewhere in the system. You could take that either technical or just relationship that is not understood well enough, and you have these cascading consequences. And I'm thinking a little bit broader than just our company. This is like one of the most common things that happens with these big outages.
I mean, I was thinking about it from like a national security perspective.
Yeah, so where you have, so one of the things I did in Homeland Security was work on something that we called national critical functions. And so it's what are those functions that the country, that the U.S. in particular, needs in order to function. And many of those are based on trust. And they're based off of a oftentimes unknown set of participants. Some are well known, some are not, and a lot of dependencies within those systems. And that's changing a lot, which I think is, from a technology perspective, you have different people in the market providing those services. And that's what I mean is one of those dependencies, the reliability of the financial system, the reliability of markets, and whether that's an actor maliciously exploiting those or through some unintentional scenario, and bringing those down, and especially in a low trust environment where people then are now getting into a scenario where I cannot trust the financial system or I cannot trust for the delivery of my electricity. And you combine those two things, and where an actor, a malicious actor, could even exploit something they had nothing to do with, but they can create a perception that something happened. Those are the nightmare scenarios to me.
I can't end on that because you said nightmare. What will help us sleep tonight? What prevents you? like that all sounds pretty bad. And I read the headline about the CME last week, and we saw what happened with one accidental thing. What gives you confidence that we're not going to enter a scenario like this?
Because, well, everything that we've talked about all day, right? All you heard is all the different companies, whether those are cloud providers, financial institutions, telco institutions, tech companies. People are aware of this, right? And they're working together. So I know, Google and tons of different companies that are part of this. We've put out things like Secure AI Framework and investing together, Amazon, Google, PayPal, Microsoft. People are investing in solutions and are recognizing this and working together. And it's going beyond information sharing. People are investing actual dollars into these things to improve the ecosystem. That's how I feel better at night. And I also know we have a lot of people who are working every day to make sure. And I do think we're very resilient as individual companies and as a country. So far. And so we just need to keep ensuring that we are open, transparent, and continue to work together. It sounds a little bit lame, but in the end, that is what it is we have to responsibility as providers in these ecosystems, as providers of critical functions, wherever you are in that value chain, we have a responsibility to be regularly engaged and regularly improving. And I think people are doing that.
Okay, I think we can end there.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeanette Mantra, Vice President, Global Risk and Compliance over at Google Cloud. Go ahead. Well, that is going to do it for the content portion of our evening. I want to thank all of the speakers as well as all of you for being such a great audience. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Mastercard, tonight. And if you want more information from Mastercard, please visit the Resources tab on the event website. You can also watch any of this event or any part of this event. You can return to BloombergLive.com. You can look for Defending the Digital Economy to view it on demand. And for those of you who are here in the room, who are such a great audience this afternoon, this evening, please do join us for cocktails. We'll be right outside here, networking. And for everybody else, we'll see you later. Goodbye. Thanks.